Greetings, Grumblers. With Nix, we have a lot of new things to talk about. I had some fun installing the Purple Launcher to access the Korean version of the game, test a few things directly, and get some early information. My character is not max level because I had not played on that version before. I only leveled a little bit to unlock the Gauntlet skills and get a first look at how everything works. I can show it to you, but obviously with the latency, the gameplay itself is not amazing. I also found a small box in the cash shop that gave me a bit of gear, even though the character is only level 22. Well, 23 now. Careful, I am becoming way too strong. Anyway, this is still enough to get a few ideas. First, I can show you the skills so you can read them at the same time as me. I will also show the upgrades, maybe we should actually start there. I am not going to read every single line for every skill, I will let you pause and read at your own pace. I will mostly talk quickly about what I noticed, what looked interesting and what immediately made me raise an eyebrow. Because in Throne and Liberty, weapons are already very complete, but the Gauntlet feels like another step above that. It is a little bit like Sword and Shield in the sense that you can tank and deal damage at the same time. Except here, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, both sides are pushed so far and you can swap between them so smoothly that I really feel like this weapon is going to be extremely strong, actually. I do not just feel it, I am pretty sure. Especially because it benefits from all the right synergies with offhand mechanics, it is going to be very, very strong with daggers but also with crossbows. On top of that, it applies a lot of weaken chances. That means we may get something similar to the Crucifix style synergy with Gauntlet, and in my opinion it could work extremely well, especially in the DPS version, when you transform into the Angry Claw mode. In that form there are weakens applied through bleeds and weakens applied through passives. Even if some of these weakens are mainly designed for PvP, we know very well that they can also benefit PvE, especially if they help trigger cooldown reduction with selfless diffusion. So yes, I think this is going to be very, very strong. I will keep showing the skills in the background. I will not necessarily talk about each one individually, but I will show you a small demonstration of the chain afterward, even if the latency makes it a bit rough. If you want to read the exact effects, just pause the video whenever you need. I know nobody can read at this speed, but that is fine. The goal is just to let you check everything at your own pace later. The Eclipse mechanic is the key part. This is what allows you to switch between offensive and defensive modes. Let me stop a bit on that. One version consumes stamina. The cost of blocking and related actions is reduced, and stamina goes down gradually while you use it. But once you have activated it, you can use it again to go back to the more tanky normal version with block chance. The alternation between both modes looks very natural, very smooth and very fluid. You can throw skills everywhere, switch back and forth and keep chaining things. That looks really fun. I have not tested every single skill yet, of course, but you can already see weakens everywhere. So I really think this is going to be effective. There is also the tanky side with threat everywhere. Some effects increase block chance or increase damage if you're in the offensive version. In offensive mode, it no longer gives as much threat, obviously. A lot of things revolve around stamina management, stamina regeneration, stamina recovery procs, and effects that interact with how you spend or regain stamina. There are also many defensive effects when you're in the defensive stance. Damage reduction, endurance increases from passives, effects stacking left and right, and a huge amount of block chance. And that also means a huge amount of potential offhand attack chance through passives, because the passives switch depending on whether you are in Eclipse of Blood or in the defensive stance. There are also shield-related reductions and defensive effects. Basically, everything you could want in one weapon. The passives are not upgraded here, so we do not see the final versions, but we can see the upgrade thresholds and get a good idea of how they progress. Earlier, I mentioned weaken applications everywhere. Well, depending on the attacks, you can apply multiple different weakens. We are not just talking about one stacked debuff, we are talking about different weakens applied through different attacks. That is very, very efficient with selfless diffusion. Once again, I think crossbow will be extremely strong with this in PvE and maybe even in PvP. And unlike Orb, this time you truly benefit from offhand synergy. So yeah, this is looking very, very heavy. I will finish showing the passives and then I will quickly show how it works, even if I do not have the full kit. When you fight, you can use your attacks. In defensive stance, when you use one skill, the next one can get an improved effect. There are already some pretty cool effects, including small AOS. Then when you enter blood mode, cooldowns are reduced and you can use other attacks that deal quite a bit of damage. It does not look that impressive here because I am low level, with awful gear and latency, but you can already see the idea. Then you can go back to defensive stance and start again. Boom, you chain again. And the cooldown is already quite low. I can already go back into stance even though my gear is terrible and I have no real stats. So imagine this with proper cooldown reduction and proper gear. It could become very strong. You keep chaining, chaining, chaining. Again, low stats plus latency makes this look less impressive than it probably is, but we can already see what might happen. When you apply bleed, you also have ways to heal yourself based on those bleeds. There is also a skill that works like a grappling pull. In defensive stance, it can pull several targets around you. It is the skill we saw in the videos, the one that pulls or pushes multiple people at the same time. I tested it on mobs. It is pretty funny. That is really the base mechanic. I'm not even sure I showed the block properly, so I will show it again just in case. And of course we have the masteries. The first one I noticed is this: instead of consuming stamina in the usual way, when you enter the damage stance, stamina drains over time. It is not stamina spent on each skill, it just goes down gradually, and the cost is actually very low. You can see that blocking in PvE can be spammed very easily. At least in PvE, we will probably be able to block a ridiculous number of times because the cost is really low. And with some passives or masteries, there are ways to recover stamina when you block. For example, if you are in defensive stance and block, you recover stamina. But if the block costs 10 stamina and you recover 12 stamina when blocking, you can immediately imagine the kind of things that may happen. That could be very nice. There are a lot of things to keep in mind and test. And then there is this version which is simpler. Instead of losing stamina, you lose health. So we immediately think about synergies. First, in PvE, if you have a healer, maybe you do not care, but the health cost is still pretty high. 880 per second plus a percentage. So you still need to be careful. It might end up being around 2 or even 3% of your HP per second. You will need strong regeneration, or maybe you could play with a vampiric counter or with wand. That could be very strong too. Especially because Gauntlet applies bleeds, and bleeds are weakens. There are also damage over time effects, and they can synergize with curses. So maybe Gauntlet and Wand will also be extremely strong. Keep that in mind. Then we have improved versions of offensive and defensive stance. Effects: critical hit chance increases, damage increases on taunt skills when you're in offensive stance instead of generating threat. Some weaken effects last longer. Why not? There are also better synergies with ambidexterity, letting you take the defensive passive I showed earlier and push it more toward an offensive version. So there are a lot of things that look very well thought out. Some effects are simpler. Critical damage, or critical damage resistance, depending on your stats. I also noticed a way to gain evasion buffs. So maybe dagger and gauntlet evasion builds will become very strong too. I do not know how high we will be able to go, but it might become something close to what we can currently get with Ravager style setups. That is something we will have to test, min-max and push further. And of course, once again, there are ways to gain more stamina regeneration, and the stamina regeneration values look very high. That is not only useful for offensive stance, to stay in it longer if you do not take the health drain mastery, it is also useful in defensive stance. More stamina regen and more maximum stamina means more blocks, more survival and so on. Again, all of this will have to be tested properly. There are also simple effects like reduced damage taken while crowd controlled. That is very interesting. I saw quite a few flat percentage damage reduction effects here. For example, there is around 12%. But because we also get a lot of block chance, it can also mean something like 40% damage reduction through blocks. And I saw other passives too, depending on different actions. So that was a quick presentation of the Gauntlet. I do not have much more to show today on the weapon itself. I did not show every mastery detail, but many of them are small percentages here and there. I can quickly show them again. There are range increases. I saw quite a few attack speed increases. Weaken chance, melee critical hit chance, melee heavy attack chance. Basic things, there is a bit of hit chance, but not that much. I did not see a lot of hit chance sources, so maybe it will be good to combine Gauntlet with Greatsword to get more hit chance. Honestly, I feel like Gauntlet will work with almost anything. You can get resistance, mana regeneration, stamina regeneration, cooldown, more stamina regen again, buff duration, range, maximum stamina again, collision chance, collision resistance, which will work well with Belandia gauntlets, for example. Actually, I can show them here because we have details on some of them. They change the structure a bit. I'm not familiar with it yet, and it feels strange to read for now also. To see the skill, you now have to click the item and then press Alt-G. It is very annoying. Before, you could just hover with the mouse, but it is fine. We will manage. You can also see here that it says potential ability with a 30% chance to appear with a random ability. I quickly checked the list in the traits or equipment information. Potential abilities include a wide range of things. There are flat stats on top of traits and resonance, but there are also effects that apply only to specific skills. And I was very surprised to see that, for example, on Gauntlet, you can get a damage improvement for Guillotine Blade. That is something to watch. There are a lot of effects for many skills, or at least a lot of different skills. I do not know what this will become yet, but it is definitely something to keep in mind. You already know there will be new currencies everywhere, but I'm not going to talk too much about that here. I will show the different gauntlets. This one increases block chance and stacks up to 10 times. There are many sources of block chance increase, even though the base block chance is a bit lower than on a shield. But if we can stack these block chance increases and also use a shield alongside it, while keeping these buffs active, then we might be able to reach 150, 180, maybe even 200% block chance. That will need testing. Here is another version with a similar idea. This one simply increases offhand damage by 90. This one increases main hand damage by 90. I'm going quickly. You will be able to pause and read. Here is the enraged Deluz Noah version. It creates a small vortex that deals damage for 3 seconds. If you are in offensive stance, the damage is increased, of course. It can also launch people into the air while the vortex is active. So once again we have a very nice family-friendly CC, just like the bow version from Deluz Noah. I do not see a shield removal effect, fortunately or unfortunately. I do not even know anymore. And here, interestingly, this one has much more block chance, 30% higher than the other one. Collision chance, heavy attack, dexterity, strength, that is pretty nice. And it can pull all targets within 5 meters. On top of that, it can ignore evasion-related effects. I find that very interesting for a full collision tank who just wants to annoy everyone. Even a berserker would not be able to dodge this pull. The cooldown seems to be on Explosive Fury or Bloodstorm. Let me check. Explosive Fury, Bloodstorm. Which one is explosive? Oh, it is this one. And it has a small cooldown too. Oh wow! So that is something we may be able to reduce to a good 10 or 12 seconds of cooldown. And if we think about the synergy with Sword and Shield, where collisions reduce cooldowns, maybe we will be able to spam it constantly. That could be extremely dangerous. If we can do collisions every 2 seconds. And if it ignores evasion effects on top of that, people will not understand anything anymore. That is going to be fun. Does it mention an internal cooldown? No. It does not even mention an internal cooldown. Wow, that scares me a bit. It looks very interesting. These are the normal versions of Deluz Noah and Queen Belandir. They are basically reduced versions of effects we already know. Let me open this properly. I tried to press Alt-G, but I had clicked the wrong thing. Of course, Black Anvil version, other small effects, with a 30% damage increase on Earthquake and the ability to launch targets into the air on the last hit. Again, more hit chance options. So if you want collision but do not have Belandir or Deluz Noah, you can also find some here. This one is more for tanking. But honestly, mechanics based on keeping threat are not very useful, especially if you use it with Sword and Shield. Keeping aggro is already not difficult, so I think this weapon may not be used much. And unpredictable at 50%. What is unpredictable again? I do not have all the names memorized yet. Let me check. Okay, it is the duration of weaken effects. So the attack defense, evasion or skill damage resistance debuffs would last longer. That still feels a bit niche to me. That is it for Gauntlet. Very quickly I also noticed that they moved world boss weapons like Dagon and others into enraged versions. We can see the enraged versions of weapons. It looks like mostly an increase in fire damage, but this is something we will need to recalculate. Here we are at 8% and 25% burning. If we compare with normal Dagon, do they still show the normal Dagon? No, it does not seem to exist anymore, so I cannot compare directly here. 35%. Yeah, I feel like the percentages were simply increased. They probably did not overthink it too much. And this seems to be the case for many items. There is also an enraged Manticus that could be interesting too, because it interacts with diffusion, maybe more damage. I do not know the effect by heart, but this weapon is so broken all the time that maybe it will finally be fixed. Or maybe not, who knows. I will not show every armor piece in this video. If you want me to cover them, ask me, because otherwise this will take too long. I can spend time on it later if needed, but I think those things will probably be documented very quickly. So my added value today is mostly in showing the improved effects and talking about the mechanics. Here, you can see that T2 and T3 are now at the same level. Fallen Dynasty, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, everything is level 50 now. And that is exactly the kind of thing that annoys me. There are items I deleted because I thought they would no longer be useful, and now they might become very useful again because they are the same level. That is very annoying. I also missed something small, but we are adding it to the video anyway. There are extra effects that can drop directly as skill cores from bosses, and I believe we can apply them to armor pieces if I'm not mistaken. Yes, we have all of this. Armor, jewelry. I do not know how many we will be able to equip, but some effects apply only to weapons, some only to bow, some only to dagger, and some to anything. I am hovering over them quickly so you can read at your own pace. I will probably do the same by rewatching my own video for a long time. Invisibility on staff? Ouch, 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 ouch. Yeah, there are definitely things to investigate here. Some of these effects are things we had already extracted from datamines before, but here we can see the final effect validated in-game. I do not know if every boss has the same source or if it changes depending on the boss. Let us check. Okay, yes, we can compare. 5 and 15% on one version, then 8 and 25% on the enraged version. So that is a significant damage increase compared to the normal version. We will definitely have to watch this closely. It seems like it is mostly the same across the different bosses. You can drop the old versions directly or get the weapons. I did not know the stats by heart either, but they may be better than before. Oh yes, triple stat. Dexterity, wisdom, perception. Oh wow, there is going to be so much time to spend on quest log, theory crafting, everything. And one little thing I did not show with the Gauntlet, but if you stayed until now, good for you. Material effects, gear effects, the equipment effects on Gauntlet. Here we have Evasion, 150 Evasion as a potential bonus and as a core. So imagine this with Dagger, which has the same kind of thing. I think we will be able to reach very, very, very high Evasion values. Good lord. Alright. That is it for me. I hope this was useful. If there are specific things you want me to investigate directly or things I may have forgotten, like the extra stat effects, remember that you can also find some of that in the Korean patch notes. They are available, and I think some things are already being shared on Reddit and elsewhere. I am going quickly here, but I hope it was useful. Personally, I am very happy. I have a lot of things to say. I cannot wait for quest log to be updated so we can play around with all of this properly. We still have a few days before Nyx releases for us. I have not really played Nyx yet, but for now I have not seen too many bugs. I have not seen people complain too much either, although when I say that I also cannot read Korean, so there is that. Anyway, have a great day. I will keep you updated, and if I get more information I will come back to you. See you soon.